we go.
Yeah, I just turned.
It says we're streaming. We're live on
Yep.
Facebook.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
I'm about to share. What's up, everybody? Y'all know we have a very relaxed show. So we're gonna let some people come in and kind of hang out a little bit. And I'm taking my time and sharing. You know, when I first started doing this show, I thought everything had to be perfect, right? I got over that a long time ago. So
Oh yeah.
it has to be
yeah,
fun.
so
It doesn't have to be perfect.
right. It has to be fun. It does not have to be perfect. Correct. So
Yeah.
we are going to get this to the right places and have a lot of fun. Yeah. And let me see. I'll share this in a few groups.
All right.
And if you guys could share it too, we're gonna get ready to get started.
Okay. Give me 1 second to.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay,
We
because I got.
and FYI, y'all, we are a little bit late today.
Oh,
No.
okay.
That's totally my fault. It's totally my fault. But still, we are going to make up for that with all of this great information um, that I think Michiganders are definitely looking for. But in addition to that, offering some pathways and some information for individuals in other states, right? On, maybe some suggestions and maybe some best practices that can be done. One of the things I want to say about Michigan as a whole and our marijuana market, there are some things that we are doing really, really well and some things that we're not doing so well, right? And I think that goes without saying in every single market, right? And so it's really about how do we get it right?
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, how do we get it right? And what that looks like. So let me get in. Of course, everybody, it's me, Simone Kason, your cash counselor, money problem solver, dopest chick on your timeline. Why? Because I'm usually talking about money, stocks, and weed. Of course, this is Cash Out on Cannabis on the Minorities for Medical Marijuana page. And guess what? I'm the Michigan chapter president. I get a chance to hang out with you guys and give you the best information possible. And today, usually we usually have a show that is like centered around general information, right? So, testing and a host of other stuff. Today's show is dedicated to Michigan. And what does that look like? So, why are we doing Michigan? Couple different reasons. Michigan is really, really a hot spot for the marijuana industry right now. There, we have the most opportunity. We don't have caps on our licenses. As we go forward and we kind of look at what it looks like state by state, it usually takes about 24 months, 2 years, once public policy has been changed, meaning that the law has been changed and accepted before you actually get a real market. And so Michigan is right there in that sweet spot. In addition to that, what makes it great is that we are looking at on a state and on a local level on really kind of inciting these programs of social equity. Now, there are some things that we're doing great, and there's some things we doing not so great, right? And so one of the things that I think we really have to talk about is what we're doing good, what we're not doing good, but also giving you real pertinent, tangible information. One of the things as a consultant and being in this space as an advocate, all three of us, and I'm going to introduce everybody, is that we constantly hear bad information. Bad information. And I don't think there's any malice behind it, but it's kind of like the telephone game. You heard that you heard that you heard that you heard. By the time it gets there, it has absolutely no validity. So we're going to uncover a lot of those untruths, a lot of those misconceptions. I want you to feel free to put your comments in. I will be watching the comments. I got my phone and I'm going to be watching you here. Let me know what we can do. And I'm going to introduce everybody. So, of course, The first person I'm gonna introduce is my partner in crime, the one guy that comes out here every month and shares his political insight is Mr. Eric Foster. How you doing, big homie?
I'm doing great, Simone. Doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I can't complain. Well, I could complain, but you don't want to hear about it anyway, so that's all right. Okay, cool. So of course, Eric is with Banks and Company, and he will always be giving his political views and also his views on not just political, but definitely lawmakers on the federal, state, and local government, right? And so we know that we have a lot to do with those powers that be to be able to participate. Now I want to introduce this beauty. I'm so happy that she's here. Now, if you are in the cannabis space, in Michigan or even nationally, you have heard her name. Her name is Margot Burner, and she has been on the forefront of us really pushing as an advocate. She's held so many positions in so many roles, from trade groups all the way up to where she is now with major corporations. So we get a chance to have this beauty drop us some real jewels. Couple things that she's going to talk about. One, of course, local, state, and federal government, but she's also going to give us information on how to land your dream job.
Yes.
So y'all don't want to miss this. This is going to be good. And y'all can't have us here all day because all of us got real jobs. All right?
We do.
All right, cool. So let's get started. Let's find out where you guys want to get started at. Do you guys want to start with let's talk about on the state level some misconceptions that individuals have about what social equity is. I think that's a good place to start, right? And then I think we can evolve from there, because I know a lot of people have questions. I'm taking questions now. So y'all, let's start there, and whoever wants to take the wheel, and then would you guys pass it off to each other? But I think that we want to talk about what the misconception is of what social equity is. I don't think a lot of people really understand what it is. One person told me it was a direct derivative of reparations. Separate, not right. Okay, so this is the full language that we're hearing out there. So I want y'all to help people, and if we can define that, then we can go in and y'all can kind of break it down. So whoever wants to take it.
I'll jump in on that one. I want to start with thanking you for having me here, and I want to completely divorce the conversation between social equity and reparations, because reparations as a concept was paid for in blood, sweat, and tears, and the lives of people's ancestors. And you don't have to build a compliant business to access reparations. So they're completely different animals. You just wake up and reparations are due to you based on historical factors, whereas social equity is a potential opportunity to have ownership or be affiliated with the now seed to sale cannabis market. As far as social equity in Michigan is concerned, it's always important to really define social equity everywhere you go, because as a concept, social equity states that there was a group of people, usually Black and brown people, who were disproportionately affected and harmed by the war on drugs. That is actual and that is true. And when you approach social equity from that racial perspective, you have different levels of inclusion. Michigan's social equity program is not premised in racial inclusion of any kind, nor legally could we discuss it around those factors, because Michigan is a non-affirmative action state. So in Michigan, our social equity program is usually tied to two factors. One, arrest rates, and two, poverty rates that are above 30%. And in some special cases, some cities that don't have those ratios, like Grand Rapids, decided to enact their own social equity. So it really has a slightly different definition depending on where you are and who your audience is and what your objective is.
And also, if I could add to that too, a lot of people tend to think that the whole framework of social equity is something just tied to the adult use and recreational side of commercial marijuana. It's not. It's also tied to the medical side. as Margot mentioned with Grand Rapids, the initial thing that we as a consulting company on behalf of our clients in that market worked with the city on was to adopt the marijuana industry voluntary economic or equitable development agreement, MyVita, which for medical licensing created a model to incentivize local ownership in applicant content, for also hiring and quality of employment goals, stressing and encouraging full-time employment, and also procurement goals, 25%, 24% of your procurement budget to be spent with local Grand Rapids businesses. That's kind of taken off where now you see other communities, Iron Mountain has that on their medical and recreational side. Cadillac has that. Jackson has that. Lapeer has that on both their medical side. They did it initially on the medical and they added it to their recreational. So it's that framework, but then even beyond just that, where we always drive in addition to the whole dynamic of social equity, economic empowerment, because you've got the supply chain, you've got the employment link, and you've got the ownership content, but then also community development and reinvestment. What are within a lot of these ordinances that either we worked on with communities or communities have adopted from seeing good examples like we've been able to accomplish, there's been a build on to incentivize in the merit or the land use, community benefit agreements, demonstrated partnerships with neighborhood and community organizations, additional support and investment beyond the $5,000 fee that you pay to the local community for your license, for additional support of economic or community or educational activities. So we really, I believe, and Marco, if you can chime in, I think in Michigan, we've really taken a very aggressive, proactive step. Probably the only other place comparable is California with respect to these sorts of local programming and ordinance, coupled with what we're trying to build at a state level.
I would not agree with that because Michigan's programs are unfunded. So, in California, in addition to having funding, you have a lot of grassroots nonprofit organizations that have been in this fight for a very long time, who provide support services to their different bodies of government. So I think that people in California definitely have a lot more support services and wraparounds. They also have a lot more participation. It's not uncommon in California for you to have 100 to 200 potential business owners at a city council meeting. So they're following the process a lot more intently in some other cities and states. Michigan is evolving because we did not have social equity at day one. So because we had a medical program that did not have social equity and it actually had capitalization requirements, which would be completely divorced from the idea of social equity. We're just now starting to really have social equity conversations around our adult use programs, and cities are starting to opt in relatively slowly.
Well, and so I agree with you on the money side in terms of that investment. That's definitely. But
Yes.
on the other side, in terms of programming dynamics, and I think what we've done in Michigan, more so not as much focusing on those technical assistance programming, but trying to structure in first in a community starting in 2018 that adopted it in their medical ordinances, and then have added it in to those who have opted in for recreational, some that just are still medical, still have it in their medical side for those economic activity, those hiring goals, those local ownership preferencing, to try to incentivize local applicants to be a part of the ownership teams and the community investment and reinvestment. Those are some points that we've gotten, I think, good at here since 2018. One thing to your point, though, that's one of the value points of why the state added and started the the Racial Equity Task Force that Simone and I are on. And so we've talked about ways, and one of our subcommittees, actually my subcommittee, recommended a couple of pathways to create the model for how we would create funding for support for licensees. So there's a pathway that we've identified two pathways, and then separately, Simone's committee came up with a concept utilizing off of a local investment program, the Michigan Stock Exchange model, which is really a throwback to what we had at the turn of the century, not 2000, 1900.
19, right? Look, I had to go back.
As a child in 1972, that sounds like a long time ago, but
Right.
those stock exchanges that we had in local communities that help fund companies like Chrysler and,
Yeah.
and 3M and others to create an investment portal and pathway for access to capital. So you're right, Michigan's been behind there, Margot, and we're trying to catch up now. And with the support of groups like yours and others, we'll really get there in 2021.
One other thing, referencing California, one of the things that I always say is that, we can have all of these provisions and all of these laws, but if we don't have participation, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
California still has a lower percentage of Black and brown participation in their market with everything that they're doing. So although they have these percentages and there's these people that are attending, it ain't working. They still have the lowest amount, right? And then if we look at it per cap, if you look at the percentage of, they haven't increased. So there has been very little increase in Black and brown business ownership in the last 3 years in California than it has been any place else, right? So although they're doing all of these things, again, as Eric always tells me, there are still laws that says you can't park your car, your horse 3 feet away from your building, right? So we put in these pathways or whatever, but if there is no change in participation, ownership, or creating a fair market, it doesn't even matter. Right now, one of the things that a lot of our smaller businesses in Michigan are suffering from is the supply and demand. We've seen an increase in the price of marijuana, which in most cases in any state, what you will see, even if they have ownership, they can't even participate anymore. Yeah. And it's a recipe for them closing the business or being hostily taken over, because they can't even once they get in, they can't meet the qualifications or the capital that actually is needed for them to sustain. So a big corporation, if there is an increase in the commodity, they can sustain, but the smaller ones can't. So there's so many different layers that go along with this. I do think that there's a lot of states that are doing things a little bit different and better, but as this goes on, we're steadily not seeing an increase in ownership. So it means absolutely nothing to me.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is rooted in a number of things. Social equity is one piece of policy. And if we're talking about systematic oppression or systematic racism or any number of historical factors, making one piece of policy without acknowledging that there's so many other factors and components that go into this is kind of where sometimes things get lost in translation. People say that it's very difficult to participate because it is, there is a high level of capitalization required to run a compliant business. That is not exclusive to cannabis though. If I was in the tech industry and I was a tech founder, I might be in a position where I might receive less funding because I am a person of color or I'm a woman, because that is about the distribution of wealth. So we see it lay out plain and evident here when it comes to this ownership in this particular industry, and how are we going to transition this from the traditional market where it was held by a number of people to a seed to sale market where the ownership is, a very few number of people. So these conversations do all go into social equity for sure.
And
all right, cool.
To that point, Margaret, we have to continue to be intentional, because you're right. It's not just one piece of policy. So it
Yes.
is the creation of investment pathways. It's the
Yes.
creation of state assistance for technical support and an additional access to capital resource. It's intentionality in local licensing where the locals are pushing, and that's, I think, a good thing about Michigan because we're an uncapped local control market. The locals can drive incentives for applicants from their communities, which then at a state level can allow the state to incentivize or create matchmaking and other programming to help people of color, Black and brown, partnered with entities or create pathways to support that road to ownership, so that, because if that local community is giving extra points to local applicants versus non-local applicants, then you're creating an incentive to say, okay, if I'm Cresco, I need to find a pathway to partner with, say, a group of people of color. No different than what you see in the automotive industry or healthcare or some of the things that you've seen with the Michigan Minority Supplier Diversity Council and other organizations in that ilk in other industries, but now applying it to commercial marijuana.
All right.
Yep. So no, so I mean, I think we're on a good path. We
Yeah.
2021 is going to be critical
Mm-hmm.
because the laboratories of this innovation are going to have to come from the states to demonstrate that it can work. And also, Marco, too, one other thing that we're working on through that task force is to go back into the MMFLA and put in language for social equity in that. Because if you don't have a merging, which right now of the communities that have opted in for one or the other, you still have 121 that are only, no, 116, I'm sorry, that are medical only and aren't likely to opt in, but put social equity in the medical program, in the medical statute. So that way you have that application on that side of the industry, additionally with the adult use recreational side.
All right. Well, so listen, so I think oh, I'm sorry, Eric. You cut
Oh,
off.
no, I'm done.
Okay. So we talked a lot about, what we're defining as social equity and how we can kind of use some of that to language to leverage what people need to do or what the state needs to do. So that's on a state level. When we're looking at some of the municipalities and some of our local government, I think Eric, are you talking?
No, I'm not talking.
Oh, okay. So one of the big things is that when we talk about on the state level, we also have to meet our local government's requirements, right? And I think that's really, really important. Um, and so moving forward, we, of course, with us having, what is it, 78 or 72 different municipalities that have been opted in as being a racial equity or social equity zone. What are some of the things that we're seeing going forward with the different municipalities? We can start there. And then if you guys want to segue the second part, well, we'll go to Detroit after that. So let's just talk about big picture. What are some of the municipalities requiring? What are they asking? And then in addition to that, what is our role as constituents of a municipality that's opted into adult use? What should we be asking them to do?
So I'll jump in first. I think
Mhm.
it's a few things. I think
Okay.
we have to look at the local level. There's how do we create preferencing and incentivization for local applicants to be a part? And in the ordinance, the requirement that the applicant, through their pre-qualification, ownership interest and disclosure, or true party of interest in the medical side, or their associated parties in the recreational side, documentation to the state that demonstrates who all are shareholders, require that to prove that local owner is really a local owner, because they have to be an owner at the state level and on that state documentation. So creating those incentive pathways where you can either through, if you're doing a land use approval or you're doing a merit application model, you get an extra opportunity to maybe be ahead in the line, or you get some extra points. It doesn't guarantee you a license, but it gives you extra opportunity. Then there is the investment in workforce development, hiring from that community, hiring and targeting socioeconomic and other classifications for hiring and training, so that you're not just hiring people, but hiring and career building. And then procurement, doing business with disadvantaged businesses or geographical or socioeconomic disadvantage, as well as local businesses from that host community. And then lastly, community partnerships and investments. So in writing those ordinances, tying that in, good thing is you got some good examples: Muskegon Heights, Grand Rapids, Detroit, now with their new rec, Jackson, Lapeer, Iron Mountain, Cadillac. Those are some communities that have really good, strong ordinance language to do just that. I'm gonna shut up, Margot. Go ahead.
All right, Margot, you up to bat? What you got, girlfriend?
I definitely the things that Eric stated, but honestly, the things that I would give us are kind of some intangibles.
Okay.
I would give us one, the wisdom of time. So this is a really big concept to wrap your brain around being a cannabis startup. And if I tell you today that they're taking applications next month, mentally, it's almost impossible for you to prepare yourself or to conceptualize the opportunity that is before you.
Right.
Another would be mentorship, because there are some very distinct differences between the traditional market as we knew it and what the compliant cannabis market looks like. And often people think that you can just leapfrog from one to the other, but they're completely different sets of rules, regulations, and requirements. And I think that sometimes those details aren't really spelled out in finite enough detail for the average person to understand. When the MRA had the road show, at the time I was with the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and I went to probably maybe about 5 or 6 of them in different cities. And I would sit through the presentation and I would talk to people outside afterwards. And I would say, well, how much do you think it costs to open a business? And they might say like $40,000 or $50,000, which is, completely lowball from the actual cost. It would cost you $40,000, $50,000 maybe to get a municipal approval, just going up to pre-qualification. But that's because things are being explained from a very bureaucratic perspective. They're not being explained from an entrepreneurial perspective. When I tell you that you need compliance, I need to tell you that you need a fire plan, you need a safety plan, this is how much the fire plan costs, you need architectural renderings of the building, this is how much that costs. Like, mentally, people need to be able to tally up all of those costs associated with, so they can really formulate a clear and concise plan.
To add to that, Margot, too, because you are so on point, the stair stepping of timeline, because state step 1 is its own unique bucket versus state step 2.
Yes.
One thing a lot of folks think is, oh, if I get my state step 1, I'm good. Or if I get a local approval, I'm good. Nope, because state step 2 requires facility build out, facility inspection by the state, and sign off. So it has to be completely to code with all of the related equipment for any of the license types. Like if you're a secure transporter, got to have all your vehicles already ready to go. You got to have your facility built out. You got to have some of your employees already hired, because you have to participate in that inspection. And then you have to get your certificate of occupancy at the local community level. And a lot of folks think, oh, really? I got to do all of that? Yes. So it's a planning process to build the resources to get to that point. You may not start with everything day one,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to, we got to help people understand forecasting.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I would
Right.
definitely say is I think that there is a misconception of what social equity and money means, and I think those are two misconceptions in our community. First thing is that social equity is pretty much it look our for this industry's demographics to reflect the demographics of what that state or municipality has, with giving equity, right, or equality to individuals who have been displaced by the war on drugs. That does not mean that everybody needs to be a dispensary owner. That does not mean that everybody needs to be a grower. Everybody is not an entrepreneur. I'm very, very adamant on the fact that participating in the green rush does not necessarily mean that you have to be a business owner. Yes, social equity means equity, socially owning. But in addition to that, we all have to have provisions of being able to participate. And some of that is going to be employment. I'm going to tell you why I say employment so importantly. A lot of y'all ain't primetime players and y'all ain't ready to be owners. And that's just what it is. It takes so much for you to be able to participate in it. And so if the state is asking you for 10 things, as a Black or brown person, you don't have the option of giving them 8. You need to give them 12. Understand this. When people call me, I constantly get calls from individuals who want to participate in the market. And to Margot's point, where they say, okay, $50,000. That's chicken change. Ain't nobody giving you, you're not in the weed industry for $50,000. That's called personal. Stop sending us stuff that's saying that you got 12 plants. That's personal. You got 72 plants. You have to be in a position where you're looking at creating viable businesses. And that is very, very important. And what that looks like is definitely forecasting, insurance, build out, construction. There is so much that goes on to this. So outside of meeting the small parts of you saying, okay, let's get the licenses, that's the small part.
Right.
That's the easy part. You know what I mean? It is, creating all of these other nuances that are going to be able to create you a mindful business. It's not the licenses. The licenses, if you're not meeting the qualifications for the licenses, that's the smallest part. So we have to be able to put our hands together to be able to pool our resources, and not just financially. I'm talking about experience. You have to be able to leverage, understand. You need to leverage whatever it is that you have. If you've been growing weed since the 80s, then you need to be able to leverage that concept to be able to find individuals who will invest in you and invest in your idea. If you have a brand that you've been using, then you need to be able to leverage that. Everything that you have, work experience, money, land, whatever it is that you have to be able to pool those assets together and leverage it to put you in a place of being a prime time player.
No, so true. So true. One of the things to that point, and then we can kind of, I guess, shift into the employment side of things, is a number of the individuals in our task force, and it's good that the state started this by the push of industry advocates like Margot and organizations and you, Simone, and InfraMM and others, was to, and was suggested was, let's do a employment to ownership type program, kind of similar to the Wisdom U that existed a few years ago, or the Goldman Sachs Small Business Program, where we take individuals who want to be owners and they work in a company, one of the larger operators, say an 18 to 24-month period. They learn management and recruitment and employee training, accounting, financial systems, tax, legal, business plan creation, procurement. And then upon graduation, they're able to get support from the state through some of the mechanisms we talked about to create funding and technical support to help them actually go through licensing and get assistance with renting and leasing and application fees and property acquisition, so that they can set up a business, so that they can get that experience in the 9 buckets of work that you need to know to run a successful business. And then they get tech support and possible financial support, but then also be a prime candidate for the Michigan, in the mile market, the Michigan local investment market,
Right.
that they could then attract local people to contribute through capital raise into that business. And it's little things like that that will help us get successful African American, Latino American, Asian American owned businesses, and help some of those who are legacy, non-criminally involved. So they're in the industry, but they haven't had a run-in with the law. We can help some of those transfer to become now owners in time, and they can be successful, and they can be part of those examples that we need the community to show and see.
And just to piggyback on that, when I created the blueprint for the Michigan marijuana market, right? A couple things that me and Andrew went back and forth on, and not, just as we had the dialogue and also with my team, is that I wanted to make sure that I created an infrastructure and not a portal. Right. And so you may have a crowdfunding portal, but I wanted to create an infrastructure that had the confidence behind it that the state would offer. And so that goes back to our point of meeting, of what Margot was saying about forecasting. So these companies that will be able to be listed on the Michigan Marijuana Stock Exchange, they have to have their full blueprint. You have to have your financials. You have to have your state and your local licenses. You have to have your real estate. You have to, if you are already inception, we're looking at only companies that have a 80 to 90% approval on your lab. The reason why we're doing that is because it allows individuals who are not necessarily sophisticated investors, right? Meaning that maybe you have not owned a lot of different, asset classes to participate. But in addition to that, it gives us the confidence, the like, love, and trust of viable businesses. And we have to understand that the state nor the government is not in the business. This is not, we saw this with prohibition. They're not in the business of making criminals rich. Right. So they, regardless of where we're transitioning from in this, you have to understand that we have to create viable entities so that they cannot deny us. Right? You got to get them in a position where there is no denial. And I understand that this is hard, but it can be done. The difference between the cannabis space and the tech space is that tech took a lot of money and a lot of smarts. Cannabis, and all three of us will be able to admit to this, all it takes is hard work. It takes hard work. I will definitely and let me tell you why I say that, Margot, because there's so many different ways that you can participate in this. And let me tell you why, you're going to talk about this, whether it be ancillary, whether it be touch. If you are a hard worker, you can participate in this business. I mean, most of us started our careers in this space with very little assets. Now, we're not touching the marijuana, but we had very little assets. So I'm not saying that you're going to become this master cultivator, but I'm saying it allows us, this green rush allows us a space where you could be a web designer. You could be, a bud tender. You can participate in this market with hard work. Outside of what we saw in other booms as recent as tech, I still don't know how to code. I'll never know how to code. so that's what I will say about that. You got to put in the work, right? Okay. So Marco, what do you want to say before we go into your segment? But just about, making sure that we're pulling up to the plate. What else do you have?
Well, I think that the thing that is the most value, and I know that you will attest to this, is your network in the cannabis space, because this is entrepreneurship and this is startup. So you could be the best web designer and web developer in the world. And if you don't know how to connect to your audience or understand what your customer's target market is, or even understand that as a graphic designer and a marketing person, there are still things that you cannot say and do in your marketing to help your customer be more compliant. So having knowledge as much as possible about other businesses in this industry, where there are gaps for your particular business, and just physically showing up. Like, just even if there's no rhyme and no reason for you to be there, if it's a cannabis event online, I'm not gonna always say on Clubhouse because that's getting kind of sketchy right now. But but there are places where you can just go and you can just meet a person. Like the very first African American person I ever met in cannabis was Khadijah Adams. And I met her in Denver. And I just bought a ticket to Denver because I wanted to see what a more advanced market looked like. And I found some random things on LinkedIn, and I went to an event and I met her there. And you just don't know who is going to be there to give you your jewel or to give you your next opportunity until you physically show up and you're in the room. So I definitely want to encourage people to do that.
I would definitely agree. I definitely agree. I think networking is really, really key to being here and being successful. So, with that being said, of course, Ms. Margot, I got some questions for you. So, as we said already, that entrepreneurship is not for everybody, right? And I think that we have to understand. You and I and Eric, we constantly hear couple things is one, we need to know that there are more than being in the green rush is more than opening up a dispensary or a provisioning, right?
Yes.
The other thing is that there are so many different things that you can do, whether cultivation, processing, transportation, but you have done something that has been amazing, that in your journey through cannabis, you have really held a lot of different positions and
Yes.
kind of leverage yourself. But I'm saying all
the Haitian in me.
right, but I'm saying all kind of leveraging yourself and making you not only this expert, but just watching anybody that has been following you have really watched you grow and participate and really kind of move through this industry with a lot of respect. So I think a lot of people would love to know how can they get in, how can they become an employee or serve as an ancillary in this space. And I think I know you're an expert. So what would you give? First thing is, would you tell them about a little bit about your journey?
Yes, in 2016 I was watching an episode of Weed Kid, and the episode was called The Mary Janes, and they were talking about women in the cannabis industry and how this industry was on par to have more C-suite positions for women than any other industry. And at the time I was working as a benchmarking coach. I was working in project management at Ford, and I just was really bored with that job. Like I just didn't like, I was good at it. Like I could do the numbers, but it wasn't like my passion project. And so I was like, I'm going to buy a ticket and I'm going to go to Denver and just see what it looks like. And I went there.
Just go to Denver and hang out.
Oh, hang on one second. Sorry, I have kids here. But I bought a ticket. I went there. I met a number of people, and it just kind of cued me to think like, well, where is this tribe in Michigan? Like, where is this group of people in Michigan? And so at the time, they mentioned in that particular show, Women Grow, and Women Grow was launching in Detroit. And so I was at their first initial meeting, which was in Matt Abel's office. And he gave me an opportunity to meet a number of people from different facets of the cannabis industry. There was attorneys, there were CPAs, there were people who were at the time working, as caregivers that were interested in pushing forward legalization of this particular industry and participating in this market. And so I became eventually the market leader for Women Grow. I held a meeting every first Thursday of every month at Fishbones downtown. And that gave me the opportunity to meet just so many different people. And I remember one of the first people I met was Paul Samways, who was a cannabis accountant. And he was very instrumental in writing a lot of the medical program for Laura. And he was a speaker at my Women Grow event. He was like, you're really interested, and, would you like the opportunity to try your hand at creating some policy? And I was like, I would love to throw my hat in the ring. And I think the first opportunity that I had to create policy was I was a commissioner for the Impaired Driving Committee, and I represented qualified and registered patients. That is one of the key things that I have done. It was a 13-month project. I got to work with people that I thought were absolutely experts in this particular field. But one thing that people don't always understand is sometimes opportunity comes disguised in hard work. Every opportunity that was presented to me was not a paid opportunity. I command different opportunities now because of all the hard work and things that I put into this path before that led me to becoming an expert. The first person that I had this conversation with, I remember Leah Hayes was an attorney. She was a former head of Women Grow. And I had a conversation with her. And I said, well, how do you know that when you're an expert in this field? She said, what do you mean? I said, cannabis is just new and it seems so random. Like, I come from an industry where experts validate other experts. And this is a lot of information here coming from people that aren't experts. And she was like, well, you are, an expert, in what you do. You're in benchmarking and compliant supply chain. That was all my background before I ever came to cannabis. It just is applicable here as well. But I was a commissioner. I was part of Proposal 1 campaign that brought adult use legalization to the state of Michigan. I was on the Attorney General's marijuana policy work group, a number of Laura work groups. I became a lobbyist, and I lobbied on behalf of licensees when I was a political director from MICIA. And now I am the director of compliance and diversity and inclusion for Red, White, and Bloom. So now I am working with a multi-state operator on projects that exist in multiple states in this particular space that marry both my love of compliance and also my understanding just of corporate social responsibility and what that is supposed to look like.
Okay. So my question is, oh, go ahead.
Yes.
No, that's a great journey. And
yeah,
that actually shows exactly what we're talking about, the path.
Yes.
So this is the thing, right? So one of the things that I think we all get, as I've said a couple times in this video, in this live, is that we constantly get individuals who are looking at what their space or their place is in the industry. One of the things that I get people that call all the time, right? And one of the things that they say is, "Oh, Simone, I do this. I'm an event planner. I make cookies. I babysit on the weekends. Thursday nights is the night where I go and I drive cars, and then I do Uber on. First of all, this is the thing. As an investor, I don't know why our culture decides that having 20 million hustles is a turn on to anybody that's going to invest any money in you. Crazy, not gonna happen. But one of the things is that I constantly get people to ask me is, I want to get into this industry, but I don't know necessarily how. And as Eric's team has done the pathway from employment to ownership, I think one of the big things is people have to understand that there are viable jobs out there. There are jobs that can get you ready for ownership. Maybe you might not be ready for ownership right now, and learning the industry is really important. So definitely networking, but how to obtain a job. So one of the things that I want to talk about, Margot, is how did you leverage your past experience to where you are now in the Green Rush?
Well, for one, I worked in compliance and benchmarking and scaling. So that is just and presentation. So that's just a natural corporate gift of mine. And then I was able to, I think, marry that with understanding that policy is conceptual and that all of the outcomes that you need for corporate social responsibility are actually tangible. So outside of all the policy creation, that's very, very high level. When you go out and you speak on a regular basis and you talk about the war on drugs and disproportionately affecting, it was really, really important to me to walk that walk. And so I was a founding member of National Expungement Week. I did events in 2018 and 2019. And it really shifts your perspective when you actually do the work. Like I've given testimony around clean slate and why it's great, but it's different when you get in front of a group of people that said, you know, this cannabis conviction completely changed my life. It separated me from employment opportunities. It separated me from housing opportunities. It separated me from educational opportunities. And having just that full spectrum understanding, I think serves me well now that I am in the private sector. So I understand policy and creation and what policy has the ability to do. And I also understand entrepreneurship. And just like the person you said that's babysitting and driving Uber, that person has a lot of energy and a lot of intention. And if they were to focus all of that energy and intention into one thing, then they would have an explosive outcome.
Yeah.
But when you're spreading yourself really thin amongst other things, it's difficult for you to kind of really gravitate the right way. And I think that I wouldn't always recommend my path to everybody because I mean, it's had ups and downs. It's pretty well now. But there were some points where I'm like, what am I doing? And why am I doing this? Because it's entrepreneurship. And if you don't hunt, then you don't eat in entrepreneurship. So I don't want to tell anybody. And actually now I'm a hybrid of both. Like I work in corporate cannabis and I work in consulting and advising as well. But I'm not spread thin because this is my lane here. Mm-hmm. So if you're willing to do that, like I talk to people all the time and they say, well, oh, I want to know about the industry. And then when you tell them like it's a little bit hard or maybe you need a partner, then they just completely like, oh, I don't want to do it. But if you want to discuss ownership, it's not a driver's license. It's like a gaming license. Like you need to be a corporate entity with a solid team of individuals. It's not meant to be held by one individual person. If you only want to be an individual, then you have to be a worker. You can't be an entrepreneur or have any form of ownership because that is what it takes to move in this industry. That and or a lot of resources.
So Margot, to that point, 2 points. One of the first things you said that I thought is important is transferability. The fact that your previous experience transferred to this industry. So if you can add a little bit to that. And then secondly, considering the company that you work for, how do they go about finding talent for entry-level, mid-level, senior level positions?
So the transferability portion. When I came to this industry, I did not know exactly what I was going to do. I just knew that it was what I was meant to do. Like I can't explain it. It was a calling. It was a gift of mine. So I encourage people to be in any form of entrepreneurship to be led by yourself. If it feels like what you're supposed to do, then do it. And if it doesn't work the first method, then revise it and revise it and revise it and revise it until you get your diamond and where you're supposed to be. And as far as the company that I am with, the way that I came into my particular position is I follow cannabis trends for multiple things. Like even when I'm not doing a specific project, like it's always on my bandwidth and my radar. And so I track cannabis positions throughout the United States on LinkedIn, just like it just compartmentalizes like what are the jobs, what are they offering, what are the requirements, et cetera. And I came across a job that looked interesting to me. And it was in my market also. And so I contacted the person who posted the job. I was familiar with, it was Anthony Sabatella of THC 123. I've known Anthony for probably about 4 years. I met him, like Simone was saying, on the Coliseum floor when I was presenting for Detroit Startup Week. And I called Anthony and I was like, I'm interested in this particular position. He was like, are you on the market? Because I think you would be an excellent match. And it was just meant to be. Like, I think I talked to Anthony early in the week. I interviewed on Wednesday. I interviewed on a Friday. I was offered the position on Sunday and I started the job on Monday.
Anthony's a great guy. We've been on a lot of channels together.
It is my perfect work from home job during the pandemic. So it just is synergy. I was the right person for the job. I met all the criteria, but my network is really what was of value, because I was able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Anthony, I'm going to send you my resume, versus if I was just, lost in a pool of resumes. So it's very important to know the people that execute functions or that are gatekeepers of sorts into this particular industry. And I encourage people to go everywhere and anywhere. This industry is not the most diverse industry. We are talking about social equity here, but we all can attest that when you go out to events or when you're in certain discussions, it's not very diverse. But that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be there. If you feel like this is what you are meant to do, if you feel like this is your calling, if this is what you want to do, then make yourself present early and often as possible.
Great. No, I like that. I think that is critical because two things. One, a lot of people tend to think that this industry is not one where you can transfer in experience from previous industries, or that the application policy is the same. So if there are laws on zoning or laws on licensing that relate to regular business or other business types, that they'll think, oh, well, maybe this industry is different. No, it's the same. Same with transferability. Your skills, compliance met and fit perfectly with this because this industry requires that as well. So that shouldn't be an impediment to people to think, oh, well, I have experience in, say, a manufacturing plant. There's nothing that could be transferable to the experience of working at, say, a processor or a cultivator. No, there's a lot that could be.
There's absolutely a lot of transferability between anything that is industrial and cultivation and processing. You are correct.
One of the things that I would like to piggyback is that I would like to encourage individuals to take it seriously. One of the things that I think that that a lot of the individuals that want to get into the space of Black and, and as we leverage social equity and everything, really take this thing seriously. This is we have never seen in our lifetime outside of tech, we have never seen an industry like this. And I don't know when we're going to see this again. And so to be able to participate in a wealth building industry, if you talk to your parents or your grandparents, they'll tell you about different things that I wish I would have gotten to, bought Apple in the 80s, all of these different things. But now since we have God and Google, we're able to participate in a market that is growing. And that's whether we're an entrepreneur, an employee, or an ancillary, we get a chance to do this. But the key to it is taking it seriously. So although it's marijuana and we might think, oh, okay, I'm just going to do this. If you are a manufacturer, then as Margot said, if you're in the manufacturing industry, then you want to leverage that as much as possible. You want to make sure that your resume is including everything, whether it's compliance, risk, quality control, whatever it is, you want to go into this industry full-fledged. The people that have made it and that are successful are the ones who have given 120%. This is not an industry, it goes back and forth. You have a lot of ups and downs. This is not an industry for the weak. You got to be 120% in it if you are going to be able to participate in it. But I will say this, it is worth the reward. It's worth the reward, right?
Yes.
Definitely.
But take it seriously. And do y'all see that a lot? A lot of the individuals that I I get a nice amount, don't get me wrong, but they're not taking it as seriously as it needs to be. You got to put in the work.
Yes.
No, you're right. People are underestimating.
Yes, that's what I meant to say.
That the paths are easy. Licensing is easy. There's an easy doorway. Or the key question, why do we have to go through
Don't we all get that?
$1 for that one every time.
Oh my goodness. Why are they making us do all of this? Are you serious right now?
This industry is new in the pharmaceutical line of products and services. It is a pharmaceutical product It's newly legal in the industry, so it's the new child. With it being the new child and it having formerly been in the room with the bad people,
Yep.
it has to prove itself. So
Yep.
that means everybody is going to have a greater level of scrutiny, reporting compliance, demonstration of goodwill. That's life. If you can't deal with that, if you're too fragile, if you're too much of a snowflake, I don't know what else we can say to you. You
Yeah.
just got to get over it because it's just the way it is. It ain't changing. But as we get more good actors in, as
That's
we
right.
create real pathways so people can learn how to be an owner, because I'm a former two-time failed business owner.
Okay.
There are things that I wish I would have learned, as smart as I might be on other topics,
Right.
but would have helped me be successful. Intelligence doesn't just automatically transfer to being successful in running a business. And
I
so
agree.
not everybody is just going to be able to jump in and be great. It takes time, it takes patience, but there's a learning that has to take place. The industry, we have to do a better job of putting in structure to help compel learning. But then additionally, people got to be willing to learn. You can't get it all in a bullet point and a half a page. Got to read.
Yes.
And the
A whole
key
lot.
to social equity is us having long standing businesses, right? The key to social equity is not having fly by night or businesses that don't sustain. We want to be able to cultivate businesses that are going to be here for the long haul, that are owned by Black and brown people, that will be able to create levels of generational wealth. That's the key to it. The key is not just us opening it up one day and closing, in 24 months. We want to create pathways that those businesses can create jobs for their and equity in their neighborhoods. That's the win, right? That's the win. That's what the win looks like. And of course, we're going to have some pitfalls. We'll have some businesses that leave. But if we can create, and I love this about Infra MM, it's really about us creating these tangible pathways so that we can have strong, sustainable businesses that will be here for the years to come. That's when we can fight against consolidation and hostile takeovers and all of that other stuff and still keep ownership in our areas. If we're not creating viable businesses, it means absolutely nothing. 24 months in a neighborhood, if every time a business closed in an urban neighborhood, you drop down the property value of that area, right? So we got to look at it full throttle to be able to look at it and say, hey, how do we create these pathways for generational wealth? Which is going to segue us to our last part. And I'm going to let Eric and Margot take this apart. I know that we have some questions. So if you have a question, please put this in. But a lot of people have been talking to us about some of the things that are going on in Detroit in the legacy program. And I know people have questions. So I'm monitoring the questions right now. But if you guys would like to just give a brief overview of what the legacy program means in Detroit, and then I'll see if we have any questions, and then we'll go from there. And then we're going to wrap up.
Margo, you jump off and start us off with, and then I'll come in with a couple.
And I'm monitoring the questions to see if anybody has any questions about legacy.
Okay.
Cool.
So Detroit altered what social equity meant in the state of Michigan a little bit, in that the state of Michigan's parameters for social equity is that you are a resident of a disproportionately impacted area for 5 years. Detroit took that up a notch with a legacy Detroiter clear designation that requires you to have lived within the city of Detroit for, depending on the criteria, for either 10, I believe it is 12 or 15 years of the past 30 years, with 12 months of those being concurrent, meaning that you need to either currently be a resident right now of the city of Detroit for the past 12 months, or if you were to move to Detroit today, you would not be, and you had the other qualifications, you would not be eligible to apply for a 12 months into the future. And that is because there is a specific set aside, which is also unique about Detroit, does not exist in other markets, in that for their recreational adult use retail locations, their dispensaries, they're going to be 75. There's half of them will be traditional licensees, and the other half will be legacy operators. There are no caps in some of the other categories, cultivation and processing, et cetera. There are no caps. I believe the only other one with caps is micro business, and also the consumption lounges. Those also have caps. But Detroit's program is also run through their civil rights department. So that makes it a little bit different also, because they are giving a nod to the fact that people were historically harmed, and they want those licenses to pass through a department where people are either implementing hiring practices or writing community investment plans that address the historic harms that have happened. It is a bit of a tinderbox. Some people are really excited on one hand because they feel it's an opportunity for Detroiters. There are other people who are concerned that it could potentially lead to litigation. That is yet to be seen because the program has not launched yet. So until it gets up and off the ground and we have entrepreneurs who are submitting and putting themselves forth as potential owners on the legacy side, we can't really make very many predictions about what that is going to be. But there is a great deal of optimism around the program.
So here's my feedback on it, because what Detroit's done, they have built in a lot of the similar components to what, if you look at the Lapeer, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Muskegon Heights ordinances, and also if you look at Cadillac, they built in a significant number of programming mechanisms to really spur investment, procurement, hiring, mentoring, and other positive activities. So the ordinance in the improvements, really good. Here's where I have the concern, because having worked with some other communities where Detroit went. So in the specific section of the ordinance, section 2120-631 license required, no less than 50% of all the license types, retail, processor, grower, consumption, microbusiness, event organizer, can be granted to legacy residents. So the concern and the challenge with that, and then also the city, and that's in section D. Section E, the city shall not license any new licenses that would dilute the number of recreational licenses across all that are allowed. That would take that number under 50% of total licenses in each category are local owners. Here's where the challenge comes in. There's a section constitutionally called the Dormant Commerce Clause, which basically states that in setting up business regulation, there has to be the propriety and the appearance of a competitive landscape where you can create some incentives for ownership from a local dynamic. You structure it in a way that it's part of the competitive process. You get an advantage, but you don't get a guarantee that a certain provision of licenses are set aside for residents of a community. The concern that I have with what Detroit has went is that, unlike the other cities in Michigan that have preferencing for either how we're going to prioritize who goes through the land use process, or how we're going to prioritize who gets points and wins a merit application, is that the fact that you're reserving X amount of licenses and saying that there can't be a dilution on the recreational side. So let's say right now today, you have 60 retailers in the city of Detroit. And let's say you have 20 growers. and let's say 15 of the retailers are legacy residents and 5 of the growers. So what would initially happen is those 15 legacy retailers and 15 non-legacy retailers would be immediately eligible to apply for retail licenses. 5 of the growers that are legacy and 5 that aren't would be immediately eligible. But everybody else, the other 30 retailers and the other 10 growers, have to wait until a requisite number of new applicants come into the pool, or they add local ownership content to a 51% model. Where the concern with that is that right now, this premise is based similarly on what the state of Maine did for state and local licensing. And they're in court right now. And I hate to bring this up because I don't want to see, of course, I don't want to see any sort of litigation, but we have to be tangible and real. In this industry, everybody sues if they don't like a the versus an and in an ordinance, they're going to sue. So in Grand Rapids, when we did the work with the city on the ordinance in Grand Rapids, if you had 25% local ownership, you got a point that put you ahead of other groups. Now, it didn't guarantee you a license, but it put you ahead for the planning commission to approve. A number of the groups that were lower, that didn't have local ownership, sued, but because there was no preservation or reserving of a certain number of licenses for Grand Rapids based applicants, they ended up losing. Based on what's happening in Maine right now, Detroit is in a path where, because of that one section, those 2 points, Detroit could lose, but it could also hurt the other communities who have similar language as a part of a competitive or land use process. I just wish they would have worded that differently so that it's not a mandatory 50%, but use some of the other tactics that other communities are doing to still get to the end goal, but not put it in language to that point. That could also hurt other cities in Michigan. And we only got 241 who have opted in, and 116 are only medical. So count my math, that's 125 that are rec or dual. So we don't have a lot of communities even available where we can try to push that local ownership piece. So that's my only comment against. I love everything else that they did and the work group that worked on it. I love everything else that they did.
Yeah, I am I on mute? I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that the city of Detroit, when they created their policy, they created their policy only for the city of Detroit. Hey, get out of my meeting. Sorry, excuse me. They created their policy only for the city of Detroit. And I don't think that they were giving a lot of thought to what other cities were doing or had to. And I was listening in on the actual city council meeting when they approved the ordinance, and it was kind of a buildup. A lot of things have happened. We are existing in a pandemic. Detroit is a minority majority city. It's an over 80% African American city. We were hit very, very hard by COVID. A lot of African American businesses did not survive the pandemic, weren't eligible for PPP loans. People still aren't eligible for loans in corporate banks and those entities, financial institutions for this industry. And I think that the city of Detroit lost a lot of resources from the casinos being closed. And this was an effort to create a piece of policy that was for Detroit. And so until we give it a chance to play out in Detroit, we don't know what it's going to look like. And I think it's so unique that we cannot really compare it to a place like Maine that's a relatively homogenous place, because Detroit created this policy this way for a very unique reason, because it's a very unique city and a very unique point in history.
The reason why it will get compared to Maine, though, is because of the reservation, the fact that you have a built-in clause that states a certain amount of licenses have to be allotted, and you won't allow any extra licenses that dilute local ownership. It's similar to what Maine did in terms of theirs. So they had a certain amount that could be for anybody could apply, but a certain amount for Maine residents or Maine local residents. And that just runs afoul of the Dormant Commerce Clause. I know where Detroit was going because look, we in Muskegon Heights, a similar majority minority city, hit with a lot of the same challenges in writing their medical, rewriting their medical and writing their rec. What we wrote in the application model was a local ownership section where 40% or more content local ownership, and we put 3 different classifications. So you could get 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point. Somebody could still end up beating somebody that's got all 4 points if they failed in other areas, but it doesn't run afoul of that particular clause because it's not saying that if there are 10 licenses available, 5 have to go to 40% or higher. That's it. And if we had and we won't dilute that number, that's the only thing. So you're right. I'm hopeful that if challenged, which is we know this industry is litigious like Trump lawyers, unfortunately, hopefully it will stand and that it won't then have a boomerang effect to try to say that any community that tries to go for a local ownership clause is somehow running afoul of the Dormant Commerce Clause as well, because in other communities, we've tried to structure it, or their attorneys have tried to structure it to not run afoul of that section. So far, everybody in Michigan has won if they've been sued when it comes to that. So we really got our fingers crossed, hoping for Detroit. I'm sure Detroit will get a lot of amicus briefs in support of it from these other communities that are trying to do the same thing. And you're right, Detroit has had a lot of challenges. We just, as a native Detroiter, sometimes we do that. Well, we got to do it just for Detroit, and we don't always think about other implications. That's so I know I'm gonna get beat up by fellow Detroiters, but look, I'm a native born on Littlefield and Curtis, West Side, 15 high school grad. So yeah, come see me if you don't like me saying Detroit sometimes has a little arrogance. We do. Get over it. It just happens. But that being said, I am rooting for the ordinance because it is the right things. I really love the land use piece because that's an issue for applicants of color, getting access to land, and the fact that they built in a model to give incentive and discount for city-owned land. I think that that is amazing. No one thought of that. So that's
Well,
a great thing.
and one of the things that Karan, if you still out there, Karan, definitely, he's put in the comments a couple of times. One of his issues has been, and he's in that area, has been obtaining real estate. So definitely, Karan, to answer your question, and we've been going back and forth, but I do want to acknowledge you, King. One of the things that he said that he had a couple of realtors, because I did ask him that, but that provision alone in the legacy program to be able to procure and obtain real estate. So around more information to come out about that. Definitely, we're going to make sure that you have everybody's information on here that you can reach out. So there are some provisions for that. Wanted to acknowledge that. Cool. All right, so we are almost out of time. If you have a question, please put it in here. We will acknowledge it. I'm going to make sure that I give out everybody's contact information. But I would like to hear some last words. So, Margot, my love, if you had to drop a jewel on the people that are watching, what would you leave them with? What's the biggest takeaway? Whether that be your biggest life lesson that you've learned in this industry, or just what you think that individuals that are entering the industry should have. What would be the jewel that you decide to drop? Gorgeous.
One, I would tell people that you need a network and that you need a team. You need a network and a team for multiple reasons. One, because other people may be strong where you are weak. Somebody might be able to be present when you're not able to be present. And there's so much information to cover in this particular industry. Don't rely on all of your information from Clubhouse, but I will say that a lot of information in this industry is rooted in conversation, that you were in a meeting and then you had a conversation with the person. This is not an industry that's extremely easy for you to Google. You can Google the laws and the regulations, and I also advise people to do that, like completely learn the law. If you can't afford to hire a lawyer, then you have to consider yourself as your own lawyer temporarily, and to read as much information as possible about the regulatory framework, the structure, what you can and cannot do in your city and your state, because knowing what you can't do helps you make a plan as to what you can do.
Preach.
I love it. I love it. All right, Mr. Foster, what you got for the kids? Of course, I know you got to drop a jewel. So I want to know, what is it if you had to tell them anything, right? If it's something right now that I'm sitting at home and I'm saying, oh, I want to get into the green rush, I want to get into the cannabis space, what would be the lesson or the jewel that you drop for them, especially for someone who is Black or brown, who wants to take advantage of some of the social equity and racial equity programs? What would you tell them?
So first,
Take your time.
Don't sit on your butt. Act. But narrow your focus. Line in on what you need and what you want. Two, Margot's point on team, you're not going to just be able to do this on your own unless you are, and there are a lot of Black millionaires and Latino millionaires, but unless you're one of those individuals, you're not going to be able to do this on your own. Nothing is wrong with that. Let me repeat that.
Yes.
Nothing is wrong with being a part of a group. Better to have 10% of a company that becomes a $20 million a year company,
yes,
than 100% of something that is zero.
Yes.
So you're going to, because that's just the reality. There's rules and structure. Study as best as you can, but be willing to get advice and guidance from experts, accountants, lawyers, consultants on governmental relations or on policy or on application, real estate agents, land use experts. These are just realities: construction, design, build. We have clients that we're working with, the multitude of vendors that they have, legal, civil engineer, architect, marketing firm, etc., IT company for website development. That's the other thing. If you don't want to necessarily, don't have the resources or team to go for a license, there's a lot of opportunity to do services for licensees. There's a lot of opportunity to do services for licensees. Just as I mentioned, one of our clients and some of the different categories of vendors that they have, we help them with those vendors. That's a lot of different companies that are working on their project to get open. To get open.
Yeah.
Let's know they're gonna still need them when they open. Plus more. So come on, guys. Opportunity is there. Nobody, this ain't like the automotive industry where you got Ford, GM, Chrysler, Toyota. Cost of entry is so big you can't get in.
Right.
We got about 5 more years where the cost of entry comparably
it's still reasonable.
Is reasonable with a team. Be about it. Don't sit on your butt. And no one's gonna make it easy for you. You just gonna have to put in some work, and you're gonna have to read. Damn it.
Right.
And get you
and it's not gonna get any Right. It's not going to get any easier. And I just want to piggyback on what both of you guys were saying. One of the things for me is that as the chairwoman for the Access to Capital subcommittee, but that's what I do, right? And so I help individuals, you know, with capital funding. And so we know that one of the biggest hurdles is how do we leverage capital, right? When we're talking about entrepreneurship. So I just want to give a couple jewels or whatever. First things first, and that I think is really, really important, and I touched on this really quickly. When investors are looking at opportunities to invest in an entity, we're not impressed by a lot of hustles, right? So when someone calls me and someone says, "Oh, Simone, you know, I do yoga, I sell CBD, I got some mats on the third floor, and then I also do a car wash." As an investor, what I'm looking at is that you have so many things spread out, and all those 20 hustles are 20 things that are taking you away from focusing on giving me my money back. It's not a win-win. So if you want me to take you seriously, I really need you to hone in on what you're doing or create a pathway where your experience has now become vertically integrated with what your business is. And what that looks like is, okay, a hustle is you selling cupcakes on the weekends. All right. A business is you've created and obtained the licensing and everything that it takes to obtain for you to do cannabis infusion cupcakes, and that you've got an entity where you're selling them. A company is where you have obtained contracts with local businesses and local dispensaries where you can now package and sell your product. Did you see where I took you from A to Z? So people are investing in companies, not businesses and hustles. You telling me that you sell them at your friend's house on the weekends? I'm not impressed, and I'm not giving you any money. If you want investors to start looking at you seriously, you have to create valuable pathways to create a company. That's the first thing. Second thing is leveraging your talents. Very, very important. I don't care if you've been growing. I had somebody call me and tell me they've been growing since the 80s. I said, well, do you have some friends? I'm sure you got some friends that's got some money. I don't want them to know about it. You don't have no money. All you got is your experience and your friends. You better tell these fools that you out here and you trying to get, you see what I'm saying? Leverage whatever talent that you have. If you have a building that's in that area, that's in the zoning area, leverage that. If you have whatever it is that you have, figure out how you can leverage that to become an expert, and it can become viable to someone who is looking to invest in the cannabis industry. There is no shortage of investors. There is a shortage of viable businesses to invest in. The other thing would be is take it seriously and pay experts. This is not a cheap man's game. So don't feel like, oh, okay, well, I'm a Google and YouTube my way through success in the green rush. No, as they have both said, make sure that you get the money together and pay experts to be able to get you through. Because what you try to cheapen, you will pay in long term. Right? Meaning that if you try to YouTube your way to success, you will be 10 years now still talking about, man, one of these days I'm going to have a dispensary. No, you never will.
And can I add one thing when you talked about the hustle? Because hustle ain't just you in your mama basement hustling.
Right.
Hustle can be on a corporate level.
Yeah.
Everybody remember Kmart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember in the mid-'80s, Kmart was still the world's largest retailer.
Yep.
Walmart and Target were in their lanes, though.
Yep.
Kmart during that time decided, oh, we're going to buy a Circuit City. Oh, we're going to add Sports Authority. Oh, we're going to add Builder Square. We're going to add more Walden Books. So Kmart's went from selling general stuff to, oh, now we the sports people. We the book people. We the home improvement people. We the tech people. Kmart's had too many hustles. What happened? By 1991, Walmart's focusing on their lane, passed them, and ain't ever looked back. And Kmart's has never caught up with them. And Kmart's is basically what they call Zombie Corporation. it still has some stores, it still is operating, but it's basically just living off of debt
Yep.
financing.
Yeah.
It's never going to be profitable again. It's basically a zombie company.
It's a zombie and as we look at there's going to be a mass consolidation. We know that. But for our small businesses and for us to be able to stay in the game, it is going to be about us establishing our brand, establishing our products, and really drilling down and focusing on. And then of course afterwards you can expand. You know what I mean? You can expand. But right now, I want to encourage everyone that wants to get into this green space. Find something that you are neat. There are riches in niches. Riches in niches.
True.
Understand this. So find something that you are passionate about in this space. Work that thing like a part-time job. Because understand, this ain't no easy lay. And you need to be able, I'm gonna tell, and we both can, all of us can attest to this. You got to get up in the morning and work this thing on days when you don't feel like it, right? So you need to make sure that you are drilling down and then establishing yourself and getting to that point. And if you can get that, I can help you find and attract investors who will believe in you. But understand, there's a lot of money out there, private equity, sophisticated investors, accredited investors. We're creating the Michigan marijuana market. There is money and funding out there, but it has to be for viable companies, right? And this is how that people are buying into companies, not hustles.
Yep.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure and an honor to have both of you guys. Of course, Eric, I will talk to you later. And Miss Margot, we'll have our weekly catch up because I got to give you more information on the market. I want to tell you guys, thank you so much for coming in. This was a wonderful show.
Thank you.
Margot is the owner of Perpetual Harvest Sustainable Solutions. And what do y'all do at PHSS?
Corporate strategy, corporate social responsibility planning primarily.
All right, cool. So she is in the link there, but I will make sure that I will put the website in the comments. Please reach out to her, and if you have any information. And then Mr. Eric Foster, the man 50 grand at Banks and Company. What do you guys do?
So Banks and Company, we're a Black-owned public affairs firm. Work for my great friend Lloyd Banks III.
The
We
homie.
do work in policy management, strategic business planning and consulting, diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting, stakeholder engagement and coalition building, and community engagement. And we work in commercial cannabis, energy, education, healthcare, especially pharmacy benefit management services, and work with nonprofits and the funeral home industry, which now is going by a new moniker, death care.
I know.
That space
Look,
too.
that's so scary.
I'm still struggling with the industry acronym. I think it may need to be revisited, but you know, it is what it is for right now.
I love it. And of course, I'm your host, Simone K-Sign. Well, co-host, because I co-hosted with Eric. Simone K-Sign. I'm the owner of Cannabis Capital, which is an insurance firm where we do from seed to sale and everything in between. But more importantly, I am the Michigan chapter president for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, where we are bringing you cash out on cannabis. So let me tell y'all something. If you have not joined Minorities for Medical Marijuana yet, you got to be crazy. Of course, we got a lot of stuff going on in Michigan, and you will see everyone that's on the show. We doing teaming up with us. We're teaming up with the state to actually do our boot camp and so much more. So we want to make sure that we keep you in the loop. Please reach out to Miss Margot, who is doing her thing. Of course, we want to reach out to Eric. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to us. And as always, I love you guys like I love myself. And I love y'all too. Y'all can't get rid of me. All right.
Thank you.
All right. So y'all done messed up y'all whole day, and it's Monday, so I know everybody got to go to work. So we're going to end the live, and I'm putting everybody's information in the comments. Is that cool?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Cool. All right. I'm gonna try to. Let's see.